Hi everyone, my name is Dani and welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, I usually post stuff about media and books and all kinds of cool stuff. So if you want to check more of that out, please subscribe. And without further ado, let's get into it. So life has been kind of hectic lately with school and work and everything else going on in my life. So I decided we do like a kind of chill video today. So what I wanted to do today is to make this tier list that I saw going around on book Twitter a couple weeks ago. So I figured I would film me like going through my thought process of why I put certain books on certain tiers and whatnot. So let's do this. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take care of the haven't read it tier first, so we get that out of the way right away. So let's put The Raven Boys there, Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor, Six of Crows, Children of Blood and Bone, Renegades, Three Dark Crowns, A Court of Thorns and Roses, haven't read it, The Diviners, haven't read it, Shadow and Bone, Anna and the French Kiss, The Darkest Minds, no. Twilight, no, actually. Hush Hush, no. Shiver, no. Oh, Clockwork Angel, haven't read that whole series. Vampire Academy, haven't read it. Delirium, haven't read it. Almost read it during like my dystopian phase, but never got to it. Red Queen, I haven't read. Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, haven't read it, although I've heard that's really good book. Everything, haven't read it. I do know the ending though, so I might not ever read that one. Before I Fall, haven't read it. Fallen, I haven't read, but you know what's really funny is that my roommates and I wanted to watch a really trashy movie one night, and I found Fallen. I think it was on Hulu or Netflix actually. I don't think the movie wasn't that good, but I think that's partially because some stories just don't translate well into film, and I could see how that idea could be translated better in a book or like even in a TV show. It was almost too much going on and too convoluted for a 2-hour movie. So I might check out the book because I kind of wanted to see and compare how it was to the book. So let me know if you guys want me to do that. I will totally do that for you. Carrying On, Shatter Me, haven't read. Carry On, haven't read, although I've read Fangirl, which is on this list. I'll Give You the Sun, haven't read it. The Wrath and the Dawn, Wicked, Lovely, haven't read. The Winter's Curse, I do have that on my shelf though. The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. Scythe, I haven't read. The Host. Let's see, Darker Shade of Magic. I really want to read that series, but I haven't gotten to it yet. Jack the Ripper, haven't read it. The Foxhole Court, I haven't even heard of that actually. Okay. 5 Feet Apart, haven't read. All the Bright Places. The Astonishing Crawler of After, I think that's what it is. This is a bit small for my eyes. The Unbecoming of Mara Dyer, I remember that was when that book was a huge thing. Never got to read it though. The Cruel Prince, haven't read. Aragon. I was actually talking to my boss about this book and she loves it, so I might check it out actually because of her recommendation. Okay, so now I think we have all of the books I've actually read on the bottom, which as you can see, I'm missing a lot of books that I have read on this list. So unfortunately, we won't get to a lot of these books. So now going on to the books that I have read, let's start with Illuminate. I think I'm going to put this into the good tier. No, I'm going to put it in the great tier. I think it's a very unique way to tell a story because there's pictures and there's like these correspondence between these people. There's very little actual prose. There's even a perspective of an AI in the book. It does take a little bit to get into it, but I've read the whole trilogy and I loved it. I just thought it was a really unique way to tell a story and it was told very well. So let's go to Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda. I love this book. I'm going to put that in the God tier because I absolutely adore Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda. I didn't like the movie quite as much, but I do like the movie and I do think it's important because I believe it was the first film made by a major television studio, 20th Century Fox, to feature a LGBT character as its lead. Unfortunately, 20th Century Fox doesn't exist because Disney took them over, so that's another discussion for another day. There's also been some stuff in the news about how the sequel to Love, Simon the movie is going to be put on Hulu and not Disney Plus because it's not family friendly. So if you want me to go into like a more deep dive into that topic, I will surely do that if you guys want to see it. To All the Boys I've Loved Before, I haven't finished this book, but based on what I've read so far, it's not my favorite, and I'm gonna put it in okay just because I haven't finished it, so I can't 100% judge it. It's not my favorite thing, and I've seen a lot of people on Twitter talking about this book because some people complain about the annoying teenage character, and I did kind of find the main character in this book a little bit annoying, but I think I just have to kind of reevaluate my mindset and remind myself, like, when I was 16, I was probably really annoying too, and I know that's also why a lot of people like this book, especially for showing Asian representation in books. This book is really good, so I do want to finish it. Cinder, I'm gonna put this in the okay tier because I remember reading this. I wasn't totally wowed by it. I remember that I read it after all the hype had died down already of this book. It just wasn't my favorite thing in the world. It was good to read, but it's one of those books where you read and you never really come back to and think about the characters in your head. You're like, oh my gosh, this is my favorite character ever. I just did not feel that for this book, so that's why I'm putting it in okay tier. Alright, Throne of Glass. Throne of Glass. This book has had quite the amount of controversies recently. I'm gonna throw this in the sheet tier. That's what I'm going to say because we are family friendly on this channel. Again, like I said with Cinder, it wasn't totally mind-blowing for me. I liked the strongness of Selena, the main character, but I was watching a video a couple weeks ago from a YouTuber his name is escaping me, but he did like a deep dive into the whole Throne of Glass series, the first 3 books, and I really agreed with a lot of the points that he said, and he pointed out a lot of inconsistencies within the first three books and with just how Sarah J. Maas wrote the book in general. So I think I see how this book is really not the best thing on the market, and there's so much other YA fantasy that also, for one, has a lot more diversity in it, and for 2, is written better. So there's a lot better stuff out there. Now Divergent. I'm gonna put this in okay. I'm gonna put this in good, actually, because I really liked the first book. If we're just talking about the first book, I loved the first book. Once we get to Insurgent and Allegiant, I didn't like it quite as much, especially Allegiant with the 2-person perspective, and they sounded very similar. Like, if it wasn't written at the beginning of each chapter who was saying what, I would not have been able to tell the difference. So as the series dragged on, it got very weird. It just went into a weird place, and I didn't think it was going to go there from reading the first book, but I really loved the first book. I liked Tris, I liked her character development, especially when I read the book. I think I was in 8th grade when I read the book, so I really identified with Tris. That was when, the Hunger Games hype was really big. So I like this book, and I still to this day like this book. The selection I'm gonna put in okay, because I also liked the series. I read the first 3 books when it was still a trilogy before The Crown, I think it was called, came out. So I read the first 3 books. They were pretty good. I think some people have described it how, how like there's those trash TV shows that you always will kind of watch. Like for me, that's Say Yes to the Dress. I love that show. So the selection is kind of that, but books. So that's why I'm putting it okay, because it's entertaining to read. So I liked it. It's okay. Matched, I'm gonna put in good because I remember I absolutely love this book. I think I read this before I read The Hunger Games, and I think I was in about 7th grade when I read it. I adored this book. For me, at the time, it was a very different kind of story, especially for a dystopian. So I just fell in love with the characters. As the series went on with Cross and Reach, I do not like those books nearly as much as I like Matched. So again, if we're just talking about the first book, I really, really enjoyed it. The Hunger Games, we're gonna put that in God tier. It just gotta. We gotta stand Suzanne Collins. I'm sorry. I like this. I really enjoy this book. This started the whole dystopian craze and everything like that. I really actually do want to reread it, as I think now I would understand a lot of the intricacies that are within the novel versus when I was like 14. So I think that would be an interesting one to reread. Now, this one might be a little slightly controversial. Next one. The Fault in Our Stars, we're gonna put in bad. because it's not the sheet that is Throne of Glass. But I also don't think it's amazing and deserves to be in like God tier. I read it just when the hype was really big. Again, I think I was in 8th grade or so, and I knew how it was going to end. I just didn't find it amazing. I think it was mostly because the characters, especially at that time, I couldn't relate to them because I think they talked slightly above my reading level at the time. So they didn't seem super realistic because I'm thinking, all right, the people around me don't talk like this. These don't seem like real people. So I think that's a general problem I've had with John Green's characters throughout all of his books. You guys have watched his channel, you know I don't really like John Green's books, and this is just one of the ones I just don't like. I know a lot of people cried at the ending. I did not, but I have cried at books, so I'm not like a soulless human being. But just this one was not the most amazing book in the entire world. Now Harry Potter, I'm gonna put that in okay, because I missed reading Harry Potter when it was like this huge thing. I think I actually read this book when I was maybe 17 or so. So I'm obviously a little bit older, although I know people of all ages enjoyed this series. I just thought it was okay. I didn't find it like totally mind-blowing, like, oh my god, it's the best thing I've ever read in the world. So that's why it's going in okay tier. It's simply that, it's just okay. The Perks of Being a Wallflower, I'm also going to put in okay, because I remember after I read it, I actually identified with the main character a lot with what he was doing, and a lot of the stuff he does is quite entertaining. But the only thing is, I don't go and think back on this book as being one of my favorites. That's the problem I see with it. But it was a good book. It was very enjoyable. It was funny, but again, just okay overall. Alright, Eleanor Park, we're gonna put in the sheet tier because there's a lot of issues with it. One of them being one of the main characters is Asian American and our other character is plus sized and she has red hair. So we've got two people that aren't usually represented in books, right? But they're not represented in the best way because our plus size character wants to change how she looks, not like in a healthy way though, and our Asian American character also does not like his heritage. So there's a lot of problems with that, as you can see, especially with the growing diversity that we see in books, especially when they are written by own voices authors. But that's why I'm putting it in this one. And I also will say later, because on this list is Fangirl, and I loved Fangirl so much more than I liked Eleanor Park. Just overall with the writing, I didn't like it either. I didn't like the story. Just wasn't really that good of a book. So it definitely deserves to be in the sheet tier. Looking for Alaska. Oh yes, yet another John Green book. Just not my favorite. Again, we're just gonna put in the bad tier. I do see what it was doing, and I think around the time that it was released, it was really good and like a good idea for a novel. But again, I didn't find it that impactful for me, and I found Alaska to be annoying, and I didn't like the reasonings that she had with a lot of the decisions that she made. And ultimately, I decided that everyone in that book just needs to go to therapy. It just wasn't that great, and I also didn't like the narration of the main character because, oh my goodness, the amount of times he talks about Alaska's body is very uncomfortable for me. So that's all I'm going to say about Looking for Alaska. I know a lot of people love this book, but I think also, again, because I read it when I was 19, so I kind of missed the mark for when this book might have been really, really impactful for me. Alrighty, The Maze Runner. You know what? I'm going to put this in bad tier too, because I liked this book, but the series got very weird as it went on, and I got really confused. It went on to this really weird rant. I can't even remember like all of the details of it, and it wasn't even like that exciting to me. Like in terms of all the other dystopian novels that were coming out around the same time. It was a really cool idea. Just execution, especially in the later books, was very odd and went into a very odd territory. I'm gonna compare it to The Hunger Games for a second just because The Hunger Games, your first book centers around the games mostly. The Maze Runner, in the first book, you mostly center on the maze. Then The Hunger Games, second and third book, you enter more of the outside world. Maze Runner does the same thing in the last two books, The Scorch Trials and Death Cure, but Maze Runner goes into a very weird place with the world. I think it's also because the world building of the Maze Runner series is very strange, but that's definitely partially because it is, I think it's more of a post-apocalyptic world if I'm remembering correctly, whereas the Hunger Games is definitely more dystopian, so there's very clear lines of what the world is like, whereas the Maze Runner, it is very confusing and the characters are even trying to figure out what in the world is like. So that's why I'm going to put it in bad tier. It's not one of my favorite novels I've ever read. Ooh, The Book Thief, we're going to put that one's got to go up high. We're going to put that in great tier. Actually, no, we're going to put that in God tier because The Book Thief is amazing. I believe I read it, I think in 8th grade or so, and then I reread it about in 9th grade for my class. So I liked rereading it because I missed some of the intricacies about the novel. For example, it is told from the perspective of death, and it follows the events of World War II in Europe. So it's a really interesting perspective to show a novel from, the perspective of death. That's just so cool and so different, especially given the topic here. It makes a lot of sense, and it's also really, really interesting. And I remember reading this book and it was just so good. I really love this book. It's such an important novel that we now have, and I love it, and I would continue to recommend it. Now that I am seeing the title again, I think I should reread it again because it's that good. Alright, The Lightning Thief. We're gonna put that in great tier, as I don't think it's quite as good as the books I currently have in God tier, but it is still amazing. So unlike the Harry Potter series, I really like the Percy Jackson series. I think it's because Percy as a character, I liked him more than Harry because Percy's really, really funny and he's just very personable as well. So I really loved Percy and I loved all the other characters, like Annabeth especially. So I just love this series to death and it's so fantastic. I love that Rick Riordan incorporated Greek mythology because that's super interesting, and I love that he's also done other books with other mythologies that aren't quite as well known, like Egyptian, and I just love this series so much. It's so good. I love Percy. I love all of them to death. Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I just recently read this. I'm going to put a review out soon. I'm going to put this in great tier because, oh my goodness, this book was so good. I remember watching a video from Catty-tastic years ago when she was recommending Daughter of Smoke and Bone, and thank God I finally actually got to read it because it is so good. So good. So good. Oh my God. It's so good. I can't say that enough. This book is amazing. It's hard to describe what this book is about, and I think it's really good that I just went into it not knowing anything about the plot, so I'm not going to say much at all, other than the fact that the idea overall is really interesting, and she did an amazing job with world building, and I love all of the characters. Even though some of them have interesting reasons for what they do, I still really, really love them, and I think her writing is really good, and I really just enjoyed the book. The Fifth Wave, we're gonna put in sheet tier, because I remember this is the book I DNF'd, because I could not finish this book. It was so bad, I was so confused, because I remember I was reading it from the perspective of one character for like part 1 of the book, I think, and it switched to another perspective, and I didn't realize it for a while. Like, there was no indication that I had a new perspective, and I was very confused, so I just had to put it down. I think I just got rid of that book because I could not deal with it. So, just really bad. Could not read it. The Young Elites by Marie Lu. This was really good. I'm going to put this in good tier. But this had a really interesting idea as well. I believe in the world that there's these people that were infected by a really bad disease, but these people actually survived. They end up having these really unusual powers after they survive, and they have a bunch of scars on them and stuff. So it was a really interesting idea, and it was like this fantasy book, which was very different from Marie Lu's other series, Legend, that I had also read from her. So I thought this was a really interesting take, and it was a lot darker than Legend was, so I really liked that as well. So I just got to continue reading this series, but I remember I really loved the first book. Gone, I'm going to put in okay tier. I read this a while ago, and I believe it's like a post-apocalyptic kind of book. I've heard that the series gets very strange as you go along. I've only read Gone though, and I remember I did like it. But as I've said before with these other books in this tier, it doesn't stand out to me with other books that I've read, and I mean, I haven't gone and read the rest of the books in the series, so that just tells you something right there. 13 Reasons Why, I'm gonna put in bad tier. I didn't like how this book was written. It wasn't my favorite book I've ever read before. I think I was about 14 when I read this book. I also realized, I think even at 14, I realized like how kind of problematic this book is a little bit, with just how it portrays a very serious topic, which is suicide. So that's why I'm putting it in bad tier, because the writing wasn't terrible. And it was like a little bit interesting with the cassette tapes and all, but I think the general idea about the statement it makes on suicide is why I'm putting it in bad tier. The Beautiful Creatures, I'm gonna put in okay tier, because I remember I really enjoyed this, but I think it's also one of those books where it was really long and there was a little bit of intricacies that I didn't quite get. So there's that. I don't remember much of the details about this book at all, but I remember I really liked it, and I think it's just one of those novels I just probably won't continue on with the rest of the series. Now, David Levithan's Every Day, I'm gonna put in good tier, because it was a really good book, and I think it's a very interesting idea of this spirit that goes about every single day in a different human body. And I think it's a really cool idea, because this spirit falls in love with this one woman, and it's very interesting for her to discover that it's the same exact person but in different bodies, and I think it's really cool. Warcross by Marie Lu, I'm gonna put that in okay tier, because I haven't finished this book yet. I wasn't quite as interested in this as I was in The Young Elites and Legend when I read them. It was a little bit slow to get going, but I think I will finish it. I did think the pacing is a little bit slower than what I'm used to with Marie Lu's books, so I think that's the only thing of why I'm putting it in okay tier, and I also haven't finished it, so I can't 100% judge the rest of the book. Our last book on this tier list is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, and I'm gonna put that in great tier, because I remember I absolutely adored this book when I finished it, especially because I really related to the main character, and I loved the romance in this book, and it was just so cute, and I really loved this romance book. Alright, and that, guys, is me creating a tier list for all of these YA books. If you guys want to do this own tier list, I will leave a link in the description to do it yourself, and let me know what you thought of all my decision. Did you agree? Did you disagree? Let me know in the comments down below. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys all later. Bye!